you for joining us today. We wanted to do a webinar series for everyone and give it a little bit of a twist. We wanted to do some themed webinars in the coming year, and we wanted to make it a little bit more practical for you guys, putting some themes that might be useful, not just from a sales perspective, but also from marketing perspective that you might be able to use for your companies. So uh, first of all, for those that don't know me, my name is Mark. I'm from the Kusini collection, and I'm here today with some of our partners from Africa and Latin America. Maybe I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Uh, Obviously, a lot of you guys know Tad, based out of Seattle. He's my colleague. We've also got Tyrone from Lusaka, from Classic Zambia. And we've got Matt from Pemba Island. I think right now, currently, you are in Sweden, right? Right. And we've got Mr. Mark Butcher, all the way from Zimbabwe, from Imvelo Safari Lodges. Oh, and then we have Jasci from Quito here as well. Good. And unfortunately, Birgit from Ultimate Safaris, Brian from Todos Santos Eco Adventures, as well as Amit Sankala might not be able to join us. So Tad will do his very best to fill in on those roles. But basically, throughout the year, we're going to run a couple of these webinar series. So today will be about conservation and sustainable travel. We'll do another one in July about multi-generational family. And then in September, we'll try to do one on photography and birding. You know, it's a niche that's becoming more and more popular. And later on, towards the end of the year, we'll talk a little bit about how to deal with availability issues as well as overcrowding. You know, so how do we deal with that as tourism companies? Okay, cool. Move on. So just a quick snapshot of our portfolio. We have partners in Latin America, Africa, as well as Asia, and also in Wyoming that services Yellowstone. But a lot of you guys know most of them. But today we're only going to focus on 7 of our partners that we feel like really specialize in conservation and sustainable travel. So today we'll talk about Namibia with Ultimate Safaris. We'll talk about the operations in Zambia with Classic Zambia. We'll talk about some of the cool things that Brian and her team at Todos Santos Eco Adventures is doing in Baja California Sur. We'll talk about some of the work that Mark Butcher has done in Huengi National Park, as well as some great stories from Jasci and his conservation work throughout the years in Ecuador, as well as now in Peru with Tropic. And lastly, we'll also talk about some cool marine conservation that Matt is doing in Pemba Island. All right. So to start off, this is our quick agenda here. We're going to talk about just the different types of conservation that some of these guys are doing. And we'll talk a little bit about the impact and some of the progress reports, just to show you guys that our partners really, mean business when it comes to conservation. It's something that they track, and that's something that you have numbers to show for, right? And then once you know what they've done and the impact that resulted as part of these conservation efforts, we want to show you guys ways to introduce this conservation and sustainable travel in your customer journey. Right? I think that's the whole part of it. Oftentimes conservation and sustainable travel has become an afterthought. It's become a good to have, or a check mark, or a checklist of things to do. But what we love about our Kusini partners is that this is really at the core of their business. It's not something that they're just doing on the side. It's become part of their DNA, right? So we really love that about them. But we also want to make sure that this webinar is not a lecture on conservation. We don't want to do that. We want this to be a showcase of stories about the great work that these guys are doing. And so hopefully you can come away with these stories that you can retell to your clients and make it part of your whole selling process. Okay. I took this really cool text from the boys at Classic Zambia. You know, conservation is at the heart of what we do, and it's ensuring that both human nature and local communities thrive together. And I think a lot of our Kusini partners really live that. So today we're going to talk about three different styles: habitat protection uh, and preservation, community involvement and local empowerment, and wildlife um, preservation and protection. So starting with habitat protection, I'm actually going to hand this off over to Matt from Pemba Island, the Manta Resort. Matt, can you talk to us a little bit about, you know, the Konini Foundation and the Marine Conservation Area, as well as the Blue Alliance?
Matt, you're muted.
You gotta unmute him.
Sorry. Mark, thanks for that question, because it's something that we are very aware of in explaining exactly what each organization does. But it's a partnership. We started a long time ago with a very small area, trying to make sure that people work up to the idea that tourism can be, well, and we believe is actually the only sustainable revenue driver for conservation work and community work. And it's through that little model that we are very excited to share with everyone that we've been able to partner with a company called Blue Alliance. They're an NGO based out of France. They are professional MPA managers, MPA Marine Protected Area managers. And they've got a couple of places around the world that are very successful in bringing community to understand and to appreciate that their natural resource isn't finite. And for us, it's more a case of, you know, in the marine conservation world, it's not about cordoning off an area or closing areas. It's about fishing. It's about regulated, properly managed fishing. We're very lucky that the government of Zanzibar have legislated fishing regulation really well. They've also really taken on a clear role with a new ministry called the Ministry of Blue Economy. And they've helped us in the governance of this. Historically, they've never been really trusting enough with an organization to manage an actual natural resource. So we kind of made history last year in August, signing a co-management agreement with them, where they have delegated the management of quite a large area now to our new partnership, which is Blue Alliance Zanzibar, Blue Alliance Pemba. So the work that basically the foundational work that we did with the communities through Kwanini, through a very small area in front of Manta, has now, thanks for that, Mark, there we can see exactly what it is. The small model has now rolled out into a bigger one. This took a long time, a lot of patience, and there are a lot of people involved. It's a real collaboration between government, community, fishers committees, Kwanini Foundation, Blue Alliance, all of us together, and of course, tourism supporting all of it. So in the diagram on the left-hand side, you can see where it says Makangale, you can see a faint blue box going all the way down from Makangale, past Kando, past Fundo, to about there. That's correct, Mark. That whole northwestern coast of Pemba is now under our management. And I can safely say that in the last 7 months, 8 months now, 7 months, sorry, there's been more work done than the last 10 years. The government are really happy that we're on site. And again, it's about tourism caring for the area. So yeah, that's something we're extremely proud of, and it's the core to what we do.
Matt, just a quick question. So when you guys started in Pemba, what was the health of the reef like? And then what's it like now that you've had this you know, marine protected area in front of your property? It's been what, 15 years now? How's that changed?
You know, we had green fields when we arrived. So we were very lucky in the fact that the pressure on the reefs and on the ecosystem weren't as large as they are in Zanzibar, in the southern island. So we were very lucky there, Mark. And the reefs around Pemba have always been very healthy. But we've seen a constant increase in fishing. There's a constant increase as population has grown. You know, when I got to Pemba 18 years ago, the population was around 380, 400,000 people. Latest consensus population 600. So there's a big increased population and a big increase in fishing. So we've basically seen the ecosystems and biodiversity have always been there, but we're seeing properly managed biomass of pelagics coming through to fish on the reefs themselves, the fish, bigger fish. And we've been able to get the fishermen to understand that these reefs are the key to everything. You know, it's a pyramid between, and like you said, I don't want to give a lecture on marine conservation, but all the way from mangroves to seagrass to coral reefs, all the way up to the top of the chain, which is the pelagic fish, are doing really well. So we haven't seen a big decrease in biodiversity. We've just seen an increase in biomass and a much better understanding from the local communities in fishing.
Yeah. So basically, you know, protected land, or in this case, marine reserves it's working.
Managed area, yes. Professionally managed areas working incredibly well.
Yeah, and great. And just to cap it off, so what's happened now, right, Matt? You've then got a really good product for your clients to do, right?
Exactly.
You've got a healthy coral reef system. Exactly.
So we call them reef positive businesses. All the way from the top left to the underwater room, actually with the underwater room kicking it off, and it was a catalyst for all the discussions we've ever had. I mean, it's been an absolute godsend to have the underwater room in the middle of this area. But these reef positive businesses are what we are focusing on. And they are Coral Reef Safari, which I can tell you all about quickly, snorkeling, diving, anything to do with a guest experience.
Okay. So Matt, we'll come back to the Coral Reef Safari later. You got a slide for that in a sec, okay? Awesome, thanks, Matt. I'm gonna move on and head over to the other side of the world and talk about the Galapagos Forest Initiative. Jasci, can you tell us a little bit about this initiative and how did you end up with this partnership?
Sure, Mark. Hello, everybody. Good morning from Quito, Ecuador. And I have been asked to be very succinct, so I'll do my best. And we'll avoid Jasci moments for sure. So the Galapagos Magic, as you know, is a joint venture that we have for more than 10 years now, I guess, with my dear friend Polo Navarro in the highlands of the Galapagos Islands, who has dedicated his life to create this wildlife sanctuary, you know, a giant tortoise spa, right? So for the past years, Polo and I, or Tropic, you know, we figured that it was an opportunity to do a private conservation initiative, right? The Galapagos, as you all know, is a heavily preserved and well-managed national park, but more and more the private sector is developing initiatives related to tourism, usual cruises. And unfortunately, we've seen or experienced that the private sector, including the local residents, are doing their bit related to the conservation of the ecosystem. So we decided to, you know, to lead by example here and try and actually locked 12 hectares of these 40 hectares to try and recuperate the original habitat of the giant tortoises, right? So that was the vision. And basically, it began by, you know, cleaning the land. You know, the Galapagos Islands is affected heavily of introduced species, including, you know, plants that come from the continent and takes over completely the local the local flora, right, and the fauna that lives on it. So our intention was to create this space free of introduced species, bringing back indigenous species like the Scalesius trees that we have now successfully thousands of them, to create these beautiful for the giant tortoises. Obviously, it takes a while for the habitat to be completely restored, and after that, we believe there will be a lot more in terms of research and see what other wildlife will come back and benefit from these efforts. So, in a nutshell, that's what we've been up to.
Right. And Jasci, how long has this project been going on?
Oh man, it feels like a long time, but with a huge, long way to do to COVID, right? So it all began like in 19, the whole idea. We started the fundraising. We had all of these dear clients of ours supporting with the funds to get things going. COVID hit. Conservation funding from our partners vanished until now. You know, we are not experiencing any kind of funding coming to this sort of conservation or philanthropic initiatives, unfortunately. So we decided to restart or resume the initiative with our own limited funds, along with Polos, the local partner that we have. And it's been basically going since late 2022, and with a serious push during last year that basically define, right, the property, the cleaning of the land, as well as the reforestation that is already in place.
Okay, awesome. And how involved can the clients get, especially when they stay at the Magic Camp?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a difficult one because for a lot of people will be kind of a not so good news, right? Everybody feels excited about getting their hands dirty and going planting little trees, but unfortunately, the seasonality is an element, right? You cannot really plant anything during the dry season because everything will die, unfortunately. So the engagement is basically on the educational front, right? We have created a self-guided trail, and the idea on this continuous development is to create stations so people can understand what the project is all about. So we have these pools that are fed with rainwater for the giant tortoises. So you basically learn about the initiative with a little interpretation center that is to be developed, right? This is an ongoing process that demands for funds, but basically is education, Mark, and understanding the effort, not so much a hands-on type of experience, because our experience with reforestation made by clients means double work and sometimes losing the plants, right? So unfortunately, although it's very commercial, it's not practical from a conservation standpoint.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for that, Jasci. I think that's super important to understand.
Yeah.
Amit, can you tell us a little bit about your family history and the stuff that you guys have done for tiger conservation in India?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah. My grandfather was the first director of something called Project Tiger in India, which established the national parks in the country for tigers. Back then, they started with about 9 tiger reserves, and there's over 50 tiger reserves in the country. So it was a very ambitious project at that point, a political sort of Indira Gandhi behind it, with him being the first director of Project Tiger. It was a very interesting times. And today, we have some of the highest population of tigers ever in the last 50 years. So Project Tiger just finished 50 years. It's a government project. But the fact that, with the challenges of today, development, infrastructure development, especially highways cutting through corridors in the country, we've been able to save at least 3,500 odd tigers in the wild, which is quite incredible that India is a country that has saved almost all its mammals that it used to have, with tigers, leopards, wild dogs, one-horned rhinos, wild elephants, Asiatic lions, you name it, we have it. So that and all that with 1.4 billion people living in the same country together with the wildlife that we have.
Yeah, awesome. And how has kind of Project Tiger transition to what it is now? What does it look like now?
Yeah, I mean, in India, you can't really work with wildlife like you can do in Africa. For conservation purposes, you can work with communities. And a lot of our work is actually with communities, with a field guide training workshops, with working with empowering women to become nature guides in the future. So tourism actually plays a very, very crucial crucial task in accomplishing what we do for conservation, because at the end of the day, it is the people, it's the communities that we live around. They are the ones who are affected by the very wildlife that's around them. But till they don't value what's in there, we don't. So tourism actually plays a very big angle here, because in India, I believe wildlife tourism is very much an inclusive tourism, which involves everybody as a part of the business. Everybody's allowed to succeed. Everybody's allowed to put a Jeep in and actually make a small business out of it. You know, a gate guide hops in the vehicle on when you go to the park, gets employment from that particular village. So the whole inclusive tourism bit, which I feel that a lot of the other parts of the world, it sometimes is exclusive tourism, you know, with high prices and high charges, but it's all people come from outside to it. And there are some community members. In India, the idea is how can we involve all the community members to become part of this amazing conservation effort to save the last remaining tigers of the world.
Yeah, that's awesome, Amit. Yeah, that was a striking thing, knowing when we went there in January, how many domestic tourists were in the parks, which is very different from how it is in Kenya or in South Africa, for instance, right?
Absolutely.
And then lastly, Amit, just quick points on some of the work that you guys do in the Himalayas, shifting there.
Yeah. We started working up in snow leopard area in the Himalayas about almost 18, 19 years ago. And back then there wasn't much snow leopard tourism around. You know, people weren't really seeing snow leopard. It was still known as the mythical creature at that point. And it's just more eyes in the field today. And there was always conflict in that region between humans and animals, whether the snow leopards would go for their yak or domestic goats. You know, and in retaliation, many times snow leopards would get killed. They would poison their own yak, so the snow leopard dies, so they won't have the problem again. So this whole, you know, snow leopard tourism with snow leopard conservancy sort of came about when they started setting up homestays across all of Ladakh, because there was no business there in the winters about 15, 20 years ago. It was completely dependent on summer tourism business in the Himalayas, but nothing in the winters, nothing grows out there. It is cold, and people did not want to do anything. But this tourism that came around snow leopards, which has now become so famous, and everywhere around the world, you see people selling snow leopard trips, even in Mongolia and other countries as well. But India particularly was one of the first to actually do it and do it properly. Yes, it gets crowded at times, but they have actually separated into different valleys, which has been incredible. And the money actually goes into the community. So today, the protection for snow leopards is some of the best ever. I would say that just because the locals are very much involved, again, inclusive tourism, involving everybody, the communities and the partners that are all around it, and NGOs that are working together with tourism, is actually the way forward for sort of conservation in that area.
Awesome. No, thanks, Amit. And then lastly, just real quick, you got a minute? Just tell us a little bit about some of the family lodges that you guys have in the tiger parks.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, they are lodges that were set up. Two of the lodges were set up by my father. I set up a lodge about 11 years ago, today called Jamthara Wilderness Camp. And they're all sort of in nature, in areas where at one point in time, there wasn't much tourism. And the idea was to go into areas so we don't, you know, get into commercial tourism like everybody else, and really do a deep dive into where we can really have that sort of Jungle Book feeling, which we do get. And the whole idea is to be able to employ everybody local. We are almost 90 to 95% local, as much as we can be. And it's not that even our chefs that come, we have trained them from the villages. We've made them who they are today, and they've been with us for 20, 25, 30 odd years. And that's you know, the idea is not to hire just, you know, the junior caliber of people, but actually upskilling them and actually making them better and better. And that is what we see in all our lodges. They're all run by couples today. They're all run by naturalists and managers. A woman's touch is always important in a camp. Just, yeah, mark my words for that one. I've seen that, and they're lovely hosts, and I wanted to build a home. I didn't want to build a corporate lodge, so that's never the case. You should feel like you're coming back home from a safari whenever you come back to our lodges.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much, Amit. That's really great to hear. Now we're going to shift our focus to Namibia and go to a different side of the world. Birgit, can you tell us a little bit about how and why conservation in Namibia is different?
Yeah, we do it competitively. I mean, the biggest problem for any wildlife in the world is loss of habitat, free roaming. And Namibia, we decided to engage with communities. I mean, very much in line with what Amit said, but talk to the people. You know, we have this plan that we always say, kick the people out and protect the wildlife, and assuming the communities don't have a right to land custodianship and wouldn't know how to take care of wildlife. And Namibia's success story is that our most successful wildlife conservation is happening in the communal land, unfenced, usually not much infrastructure, poor water. And we have thriving rhino communities there. We have interesting stories about desert-adapted lions, desert-adapted elephant, where our most successful conservation is happening outside fenced-in national parks, outside private reserves. We don't even have these typical wildlife sanctuaries in Namibia because communities actually welcome wildlife in the communal land because they directly benefit from it. There's a saying, if it pays, it stays. And if community sees the value of wildlife, they very quickly become the most amazing wildlife protection units you can imagine. All the rhino rangers and desert lion rangers are community rangers. And that's where we are. We have the advantage, of course, being a sparsely populated country, very small population density. But we, in the 90s, had real problems with poaching, and the black rhino population was nearly completely wiped out. And now we have a thriving population just outside the fences, where they were 100 years ago. And how many people can say you can see wildlife as they roamed 100 years ago?
Yeah, and then I mean, that's incredible. And I think it's important to differentiate some conservation models don't work in others, because Namibia is just, it's so different that way, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a really, I mean, it's also in our constitution that nearly half of countries under some form of protection. So we have complete buy-in by the government, which also helps, you know. We still fight the mines every day, but the lack of water can sometimes be a blessing. And it isn't also most easily farmed land, but even then, farmlands are already seeing the value of conservation. So yeah, it makes it really different, and does make game viewing a little bit more challenging if you have a truly wild rhino. And we always remind people that black rhinos are antisocial, and usually when you go black rhino tracking, it's one rhino, not a crash of rhinos like the white rhino. And so it takes longer, but that makes it even more rewarding. You know that wild rhino wasn't fed by Lucerne. He really is where he wants to be.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the work that you do in the joint management area, and maybe explain what that means?
Sure. Now this was something else. It's already tough when you work with one community in one joint and one conservancy, but this is actually multiple conservancies. We needed traversing rights because the rhinos don't follow boundaries, even imaginative boundaries. And for us to have traversing rights, for us to build our camps there, we needed agreement of all three conservancies, which means many, many hours under the tree, and getting agreement of everybody and building that trust. And it's not just about conservation here, it's also supporting the communities, management of roads. I mean, if you look at this as a typical landscape, there aren't no roads. Water holes, not just for the wildlife, but also for the communities to survive here. Engaging with Save the Rhino Trust on the rhino ranges and the training of community game guards. So it's involved, it took longer than we planned to build the trust. And most importantly, in most communities, is communication, listening, engaging, understanding their needs, while of course trying to have our needs come through. So this is the first. We have multiple conservancies agreement and having this traversing rights with a focus on black rhino protection, but also rehabilitation of habitat and all these experiences.
Yeah, awesome. And then I think that it's super important that you've turned that into a product, right? That your clients can interact with, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about what they can do with the black rhinos?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, we always tell people, if you want to save the world, just go on safari in Africa, or even South America and Central America, because of course the Kusini partners are all about ecotourism. So just by visiting any of our camps and going on holiday with us, you are directly contributing to conservation. A lot of people don't always appreciate that. They say, "Oh, can I donate?" And we say, absolutely, but donations are once-off fees. So our own Camp Doros has a revenue per guest per stay going directly to Save the Rhino Trust and other conservancies projects, which means they get a consistency of funds, because you can't just once-off pay a rhino ranger. You need them to have employment for years to come. You need the support in uniform and tracking. For example, doesn't help you track or radio collar an animal like a giraffe if you can't track it consistently. So one of the initiatives we do is pack conservation. It's once a year we do a annual handover to not just rhino ranges, but variety of rhino ranges, including pangolin ranges, desert lion ranges, and rhino ranges. You know, they traverse these amazing areas in the middle of nowhere. They need boots, they need tents, they need binoculars, they need uniform. It takes a weathering. So we collect this throughout the year and then hand it to the community game guards and everybody at the end of the year. It's strictly controlled. We don't hand this out in the field. There's a quota. A senior guide might need this. A new guide needs the full kit, whereas maybe an experienced guide just needs a new set of boots. So you don't just hand it out in the field because you don't know who's out in the field there. But for this pack conservation, it's so easy to do. You click on the site. You can choose which pack you want to contribute to. And once a year, then we pack it all together, get the tents and the backpacks and the uniforms and the hats and everything together, and we hand it out to the various ranges of Namibia. It's become very successful, and we keep reminding people because the more we get, there's no limit to how many packs we collect. So it is very easy to do. For guests traveling with Ultimate Namibia, we can even visit the Save the Rhino headquarters in Swakopmund if you do a road trip, and just get to learn about what they do. But we try to encourage people to learn as much out on the field as possible.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Birgit. That is some really great work that you guys are doing. It's great. So we'll move on to a little bit of a different topic, talking about community involvement and local empowerment, which is just as crucial as habitat protection. And I'm going to hand it over to Mark Butcher from Zimbabwe, from Hwange. Butch, can you tell us a little bit the story behind Camelthorn, and what's the story behind building a lodge in community land?
Yeah, okay. Good evening to all of you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk here. I think we've all been told to keep it short, so I will endeavor. If I drag on too much, feel free to wave, Tad. They are very, very proud about the portfolio of lodges we built around Hwange, but most proud, of course, about Camelthorn Lodge. This one may have been the heaviest lift. And going back to my game rangering days, when as young game rangers, we were literally in a low intensity conflict with the communities around our parks, with poaching and human wildlife conflict on a day-to-day basis. The dream was always to bring tourism out of the parks and out of Victoria Falls urban environment, and put lodges onto community land. And of course, today all over Africa, this is definitely the case. You just heard about what's going on with in Namibia there, but believe me, back in the late 80s and the early 90s, it was a heavy lift for us. And when we finally got Camelthorn Lodge go ahead, a green light from the communities, it was a huge moment for us, and lots of interesting things that happened there. The Chief Matapula at the time, the older chief, he's passed on now. His son is the current chief, but wonderful community leader with great gravitas. He used to walk into the room and he would control a room. But he said right from the beginning, if we're going to do this tourism thing, we're not going to put up tents. I'm not interested in tents. So we're going to do something here. We're going to build something for our children's children, and that's how we built Camelthorn Lodge. It's not necessarily what I would have chosen to build. That's what the communities wanted, and that was really the starting point for everything that we've done there. We've tried to do it in line with the communities. All the people that work there come from walking distance of that lodge. It's the only lodge that's operational in our part of Zimbabwe that actually is on community land. That's a really, really sad statement about the state of affairs of tourism. All tourism is on government land and private land and in the urban areas, So, and out of that, Camelthorn Lodge has flowed a number of projects. And guys at Kusini just put up 3 of them, which are kind of disappointing to me because I would love to talk about 20 of them, but I'll talk about 3 of them over here, And one of them is our school lunch program. Very, very proud of what we do there. The communities in the areas around us impoverished, a lot of times drought stricken. A lot of times the subsistence farmers lose all their food to elephant crop raiding. And by providing food at the schools, it encourages the kids to make that 3, 4, 5 kilometer walk to school every day. And they get them coming to school. They get a nice big square meal, and it keeps them energized and keeps them focused on education, because frankly, a future without education is tough. You know, a lot of clean drinking water. There's no community health without clean drinking water. In our part of the world, there's no rivers or anything like that. There's no piped water, so everything has to come from underground. And we haven't just put up a couple of wells at the local village, as a lot of companies I won't mention who greenwash too much do. We have literally spread a huge swathe of boreholes, maybe 100+ boreholes over dozens and dozens and dozens of villages that are providing clean drinking water for thousands and thousands of families. You know, a Smile and Sea Safari, one of my own favorites. We had some Spanish and Italian dentists that visited our lodge as tourists back in 2010, 2011.
Wow.
And since then, they've been coming every single year, and they come over every year and provide free dental care and free optical care, spectacles, cataract surgery, through to fillings, root canals, all kinds of fantastic things. Program has grown and grown and grown. Last year, we did our 42,000th patient. And these numbers are easy to rattle off, you know, but we did over 5,000 patients last year. It's hard to put it in context, but in one particular day, we did over 1,500 patients at Sipepa. And they're under a bunch of marquees and under trees. We treated more people in a day than were treated by 4 urban hospitals in our provincial capital. And those are 4 urban hospitals filled with doctors, nurses, anaesthetists, and all kinds of medical practitioners. But we, under our tents with this incredible team of heroes, treated more people in a day. So that kind of puts it into scale. And that's just a couple of the kind of programs we do. And these are not just things we do once a year. This program been running since 2011. These are programs been going for many, many years. A huge, huge program in terms of community upliftment, socioeconomic development, and just helping communities see some benefits from living next door to wildlife.
Awesome.
If there's anything else you want to add to that, Tad or Mark?
No, that's great, Butch. We're going to come back to some of those points in a sec. But I also do want to talk a little bit about, go back to Pemba Island and talk about the Casa Center, Matt. I think this is a really cool initiative.
I just wanted to say, Mark, that's just unbelievable stuff, man. It's just amazing. Just incredible. So inspiring. So from that inspiration, yeah, we, again, quite a while ago, started talking to communities about what they're looking for their futures. And we've basically reduced all these small little projects and decided to focus most of our energy on helping local communities build their own economies. You could call it an entrepreneurship incubator. You can call it lots of things, but it's more or less a business center that allows and gives opportunity to all the local communities around us, about 6,000 people in the northern little finger of Pemba there, to work and build their own little businesses. These are micro businesses centered around micro loans. We've set up 6 village banks, and these village banks work as a catalyst to help people fund these small projects and basically doing what they know how to do already. I mean, we're not going in and trying to change the way they do things or anything. We're trying to help them build more resilience in their companies. So learning how, basically business 101, learning how to run their business money separate to their private money, how to help them achieve find markets for their products, and all done in a way that allows us to talk about the environment and allows us to talk about how to sustainably build something like this, how to sustainably build a business that's not only good for their own business and the economics of where they are, but also for the environment and a wider socio-economic influence.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. That's really great. Then moving back again to Tropic, I think Jasci, you tell us a little bit about your history working with the Waorani community.
Sure, Mark. Well, that's actually where it all began for us, deep in the Amazon rainforest of Ecuador with the Waorani people, where I dedicated a lifetime, became Nanka, half Waorani, won a few blowgun spear contests, and ended up developing a fun lodge in the middle of the Amazon rainforest of Ecuador that was basically highlighting the beauty of this unique indigenous culture, and which was kind of a different approach from the other jungle lodges that are more focused on the wildlife experience, which is what the majority of people would like to do when they go to the Amazon rainforest, right? So that you can see the tropics approach to tourism has always been very different from the rest, right? Always trying to do things a little bit different. And basically, like Tad said, stealing my words, Tad, tourism being used as a tool for conservation. But I really wish that all of us could use that sentence, because we really need a lot more of that. So that was kind of in the middle of the 90s. We moved on and ended up building another lodge with aid from the U.S. government with the Sequoia people. We had the Waorani, the warriors, we had the Sequoia, the magicians, and then we moved on to the Galapagos, ended up creating the first and only still going community-based tourism operator in Floriana Island, one of the most remote islands of only 150 residents and 10 dogs. I think that stats, it's old for me. Probably there are a few more dogs there nowadays, probably not a lot more people. And the community-based operation is going, and we decided as a company to put Floriana in the center of our island hopping tours, which was back then 15 years ago. I was just looking at the newsletter the other day and found a photo of my daughter Alegria there, newborn, when we were exploring how to create a tourism experience in that little island. And now that project is still going. Floriana Lava Lodge is still an important part of our portfolio. And from there, we moved on to the Andes, right? We ended up buying Chilcabamba, which was a different kind of business model, because usually Tropic is being associated with local communities as the private sector partner that facilitates the connection with the market, but keeping the property of the initiatives local, right? And with Chilcabamba, we decided to go on a different direction, especially because that's not community land or state land like you guys have in Africa. But basically, there was a private lodge that was for sale. We decided to buy it, and then created this hub and network of little businesses that are now thriving around Chilcabamba. And then life, COVID, whatever, took me to Peru. We started Tropic in Peru, learning about the destination. I started doing my own explorations and bump into this incredible community-based venture called Manta Lodges. Basically, it's a lodge-to-lodge trek around the Apu Ausangate, a sacred mountain for the locals, and ended up finding these two communities that were crazy enough to build 4 lodges above 4,500 meters altitude. And we're Tropic very known for finding very difficult products to sell. So this is another one to our portfolio. Ended up doing the trek myself with my dear friend Tad here, who could barely sleep every single day because of the altitude. And it was another life-changing adventure for us, right? We basically connecting with the locals, experiencing this unique remote wilderness area above from the clouds, meeting the locals, seeing the ecosystems, learning about the conservation challenges that we are experiencing now in the Andes. I don't know if you guys know this, but in Ecuador now we're having blackouts of 3 to 4 hours a day because there is no rain in the Andes. And on a country like ours, when it doesn't rain, hydroelectrics don't function, and when those things don't function, we don't have energy. So basically, our glaciers are shrinking. The Andes are in trouble, right, in terms of climate change, and these local communities also have to adapt to these changes in the crazy situation where our world is at now. So basically, we are doing baby steps still. We just did the trek several months ago. We are getting to know the community better, their story, why they decided to do this crazy venture with tourism when they have their local customs. So it's basically the baby steps that you have to do when you try to create a relationship and a conservation or let's call it social inclusion or poverty alleviation initiative like this one, right? So I'm still a little bit ignorant about, you know, the depth of the work that needs to be done, but all of our efforts now are being moved to support the community of Chilca. That, funny enough, the name is Chilca, similar to our Chilca Bamba Lodge in Ecuador. So already has a special space in my heart, this community, and Josefina. So basically, yeah, we're very excited about this new community involvement and business that Tropic is involved, and now proudly commercially represented exclusively in around the world. So yeah.
Awesome. Shifting to Baja California Sur, Brian, can you tell us a little bit about this amazing initiative that you guys are doing?
Yes, Alianza Sura Basura. This is really a community-led project, really to change our community's relationship with trash. As most of you know who have heard me talk before, you know that Baja California Sur is one of the least populated but fastest growing states in Mexico. And Todos Santos and Pescadero are some of the fastest growing communities within Baja California Sur. So the amount of tourism and tourism development coming in is growing at a staggering rate. And we simply do not have the resources or waste management infrastructure in place to deal with that. So when we look out and we look at what we as concerned citizens can do about that, what we realize is we can embrace the zero waste principles, which the first of all is refuse and reduce. And that is something that tourists can easily get involved with. So we have created something called the WasteWise Business Directory, WasteWise Business All-Stars Directory, I should say. And in that, we are getting local tourism businesses to self-assess the steps that they are taking to reduce their impact on the environment and keeping waste out of the dump. So this is things like having installed a water filtration system on their property so that tourists don't have to have single-use plastic water bottles. Because, you know, when everybody comes to Mexico, everybody wants to have their single-use plastic water bottle because everyone knows that the water is going to kill you in Mexico. Not the truth. We have excellent water filtration systems. What are they doing in terms of their organic waste? Are they keeping it out of the dump by repurposing it and composting and so on like that? So when people are coming in, visitors are coming into Todos Santos, they can look at this WasteWise Business All-Stars directory and spend their tourism dollars on those businesses that are having the highest impact of reducing and repurposing the waste that they produce. So this, we think, is one of the most powerful tools that's available to really influence the behavior of both the visitors and the businesses in our town. As you know, Todos Santos and Pescadero are coastal communities. In this great article written by Kathleen Relihan in Afar magazine, she mentions that 8 of 10 visitors go to coastal communities in Mexico. And it's not a glorious history. If you look at places like Cancun and Tulum, Puerto Escondido, these towns have essentially been overrun by trash. And they've been loved to death. And this is and we see this wave kind of moving across Mexico towards the west. And this is absolutely the thing that we want to stop. Todos Santos and Pescadero are in an incredibly beautiful location. We have an incredible biodiversity of marine life and land life and plant life. We have a really high rate of endemism. All of this is at risk with the pollution that comes in with all the waste that's produced coming in and when there's no proper management. So Alianza Sura Basura actually started because the town dump was catching on fire. So we did a waste audit in Todos Santos and Pescadero, and we found that fully 60% of the waste that we produce as a community is organic matter. And when organic matter goes to the dump and just sits there, it produces methane. And methane is actually, 20 to 30% more lethal and nasty, than carbon monoxide. So it's super bad. So we started really focusing on how can we keep or divert our organic waste out of the landfill. And so we're super excited. We just announced, we signed an agreement with the federal government, in fact, to create a community-led organic waste farm.
Wow.
And the goal in the next few years to divert at least 30% of our organic matter away from the dump and into composting and other soil products. Because the other part of Todos Santos and Pescadero is that these are agricultural communities. And since the 50s, they've been on the cycle of monoculture, pesticides, fertilizers, and the soil here is essentially just dirt. And so now there's a regenerative farming campaign in Todos Santos and Pescadero, and the community compost farm can lead into that for soil repair and having good compost. So the great thing about the agreement with the federal government is that they are providing researchers to research the best type of composting methods that'll have the best impact on our soil with our type of waste that we produce here in Baja California, sir.
Awesome. Wow, that is what great work, Brian. Thank you for that, and thank you for explaining it, because sometimes we just see it and it becomes an afterthought, but to have someone actually explain it is very valuable. Can you tell us just quickly a little bit about some of the work that you guys do in the community and how important that is for your business?
Well, absolutely. That is our business. We are deeply embedded in our community, and I think it all actually ties into the zero waste. So, for example, we talked about the visitors coming in and having alternatives to reusing single-use plastic water bottles. Well, with Alianza Cero Basura, we've been working in partnership with a group called Waterways Baja, and we have a series of public water bottle refill stations around town, so people can just bring their water bottles. And we have been big supporters of lots of the festivals in Todos Santos, the Gastropino Festival, the Music Festival, the Film Festival, the Day of the Dead Festival. And the exciting thing to see is that these festivals are embracing zero waste principles. Because as you know, when you go to these festivals, especially food festivals and stuff like that, the amount of waste that they can produce is just enormous. And so it's super exciting to see. At first, we were out there trying, we were pushing, please make your event a zero waste event. And now all the events are coming to us and saying, how can we make our events a zero waste event? So the amount of waste that is not being produced is astronomical. And that is building on our relationships that we've had with these festivals over the years. So to keep that thing going, we are now building out on our website a community resource hub so that people, all they have to do is come into the website and they click on, I'm putting on an event, and it takes them all through the things of all the resources that they can use to greatly reduce the amount of waste that they produce, and then what to do with the waste that they do produce. So, and this all ties into all the things that we've been doing before. We have been deeply involved in the festivals. We're supporting the athletic clubs. And we also work with local families in different places. So our camps, one of our camps, the Sierra camp, is on the ranch of a local ranching family, and they are deeply involved in every aspect of it, providing food for it, providing guides, providing like I guess different food, different activities in there, and then cultural activities on the ranch. So everything that we do is geared towards being engaged with the community and helping it be the community that we want it to be. This is this is our home. This is where we want to be, and there's nobody coming to the rescue. So this is if we have to really help design the type of community that we want to live in and shape the future for how we want our town to be.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Brian. That is great, and it's good to let everyone know about some of the great work that you guys are doing in Baja California, sir.
Tried to get Amit on, Mark, but he is in a transfer vehicle headed to a hotel, so I'm going to let you talk about this amazing initiative as well.
No worries. This will be just a quick one. Amit and his team basically led a women's guide training that was funded by Encounters Asia alongside another company that was really, really into conservation. So this doesn't happen too often, unfortunately, but the more we start doing this, we can see more and more of these guides get proper training, women guide, get proper training to start becoming guides in these national parks, right? And that's really tough sometimes without the support of the private sector. So generally you have to fundraise to have these guide trainers come in and train a host of guides to do it. So this is one of the initiatives that Amit and the team at Encounters Asia have done to help empower women in their community. Okay, I'm gonna try to whiz a little bit quickly, but I want to give some spotlight to Tyrone from Classic Zambia to talk about their really cool backstory of Musikesi conservation in the Kafue National Park. Tyrone, if you're still there, tell us a little bit about the backstory and why it was needed.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, I'll also still try and keep it short and sweet as I can. But the long story short is that about 12, 13 years ago, myself and my university colleague, we studied conservation biology ourselves at university, started our own little walking focus safari camp in a very remote area of northeastern Kafue National Park in Western Zambia. And when we say remote, it was in an area of the park that had never had tourism in it before. And when I say an area of the park, this area in the eastern side of the Kafue River is over about 6,500 square kilometers. Yeah, that's a good map there. It's twice the size of the Masai Mara Reserve. That was one of the reasons that Phil and I were very excited by putting our sort of our hats down in that area and exploring. We naively got a concession right slap bang in the middle there. And yeah, 12 years ago, started operating with a few old knackered tents and Land Rovers and our feet on no roads in that area. And after a few years of operating and getting a little bit of a name for ourselves under our banner, Jeffrey and McKee Safaris at the time, we started to realize that the wildlife in that area was really very special. And just our mere presence had sort of created a bit of a haven around the area that we were operating in. Of course, we couldn't go too far because we were only on foot. So there was a lot of landscape still to be explored. And we thought we were riding a high when we were sort of noticing the recovery of lion populations, for example, elephants coming back into the area. And then in 2017, we were hit by a very sharp reality of our 21 known lions, for example, using them as sort of an indicator species. Me and Phil found 7 of those dead in the April and May before camp opened. In hundreds of snares were set in this area. It had not happened in the last 3 or 4 years since we had been in there. And so we were left with this very dire situation, seeing all this wildlife sort of in front of our eyes, getting sort of targeted, of course, mainly for the bushmeat trade, but the bycatch was evident. And so we went to the authorities and sort of said, guys, please put some patrols in the area. And the authorities didn't have any capacity to do so. So then we went to some of the NGOs working in the environment at the time. They did not have capacity to do so. Phil and I didn't really have 2 sticks to rub together at the time, but were left with the only other option that was suggested to us by the government, and that was to incorporate our own sort of non-profit and raise some funds to help train scouts that we can add to the effort in the park. And so we did. So we incorporated Musikesi Conservation, which is its own non-profit in law, separate to our Classic Zambia, or our safari operation. And so, yeah, since 2017, we've been training slowly and fundraising slowly on the back of all of our tourism. And that's where all of our funding has come from the initial phase, up to now about $250,000 of revenue from our tourism operation has gone into the establishment and the continued growth of Musikesi conservation in that landscape. So we now have over 42 officers seconded to our project that operate law enforcement. As this sort of slide here shows, we've been sort of using some of the snared individuals over these years as bastions for the story. And this is what this, I guess, call is all about, is from the guest perspective, to know that they're part of that story intrinsically is very nice, of course, to know, but they actually see these characters. Tripod, the lioness here, is still around. She was snared in that terrible sort of period we were there. encountering. So yeah, it's a growing project, 42 scouts. And I think the next slide, just to finish on, is whilst the recovery of wildlife and the picking up of snares and arresting poachers is lovely, Phil and I, with our sort of biological hats on, we always wanted to, down the line, study the recovery of wildlife. In fact, study wildlife, especially in the Kafue, which is a very understudied park. Now, on the back of the anti-poaching work we were doing, we wanted to make sure that we were actually having a tangible impact on the recovery of wildlife, not just reporting on picking up snares or arresting 300 people, whatever it might be, but is that resulting in a net positive result? So we set about creating a research arm to Musikesi Conservation, and now very proudly we have a female-led research arm of Musikesi Conservation, which is out in the field now, 3 different vehicles, 3 years worth of full-time study. We've had our first sort of published papers on the recovery of wildlife in this area. And so, yeah, lots going on that our guests can be sort of cognizant of and part of when they stay with us out of our camps, which operate in that area.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really cool story, Ty. Thank you for sharing that. And then we're slowly running out of time here, but definitely we need to talk about the rhinos in Hwangi. Butch, back over to you. Just tell us in 3-ish minutes the story of the rhinos, and perhaps I think a better story is how it's impacted the community. I think there is a lot more to that than seeing the rhinos.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Mark. Yeah, this one's very, very close to my heart. You know, the last white rhinos were poached in Hwangi in 2002, 2003. And ever since then, we've been dreaming about how we could bring rhinos back into the park. Obviously, we've seen some large-scale white rhino reintroductions onto government land and in other parts of Africa, next door neighbors to us, etc., that have frankly flopped, you know. So we were always cautious about bringing rhinos back into the park and how we would do that. So about 5 years, it's about 6 or 7 years ago now, back in 2017, we kind of came up with the idea perhaps we could reintroduce rhinos into the Hwangi landscape, and instead of putting them in the park, is put them on community land. And from that, our community rhino conservation initiative grew. Took us 5 years to get it on the ground. Very, very, very heavy lift, convincing authorities about the wiseness of putting our beloved rhino onto community land, where they were perceived to be amongst the poachers. But in fact, I knew better. We were putting them embedded amongst communities of people who would look after them. And from that has grown a wonderful program. You know, by time they were introduced in 2022, a clinic that we'd built nearby, Ngamo Clinic, was just starting to open its doors. But the rhinos arrived in May. By September of that same year, the clinic was literally floundering because of funding. And the communities immediately decided to use their community rhino conservation levy, which is the gate fee paid by visitors to see the rhino, to fund their own clinic. And within 4 months of those rhino arriving, we had 5 villages receiving free healthcare. All the nurses at the clinic were being paid US dollars out of rhino funds. All the medicines were being purchased out of rhino funds by our staff. And we were stocking that clinic. It's actually still to this day, one of the best stocked clinics in our part of rural Zimbabwe. And that's all kind of grown out of bringing rhinos onto community land. I love that picture on the lower left. You know, that's school kids. Over 1,000 school kids, rural Zimbabwean school kids who live on the boundary Hwangi National Park have seen rhino. It's really become a huge thing for them. You know, they discuss about who their favorite rhino is. The boys, instead of playing soccer during break time at school, they play Cobra Rangers. You know, they'll do press ups and march around with their caps, with their hats folded over as caps, and issue instructions to each other. And they can also see what they aspire to. And I love that picture on the top left. You know, all the badala, you know, the community leaders, the fathers, the chiefs, the headmen from all the villages coming in to visit the rhino. So really exciting program, and really augurs well for what the future paradigm shift in rhino conservation, not having governments look after them, not all being on essentially white-owned conservancies, you know, rich foreigners owning conservancies in Africa that are filled with rhino, but instead embedding rhinos amongst communities, somewhat as worked so successfully with those black rhino in Namibia. We're doing the same thing in Zimbabwe. Very exciting.
Cool. And Butch, I think this is still an ongoing process, right? We're just in the early phases of this conservation effort, and for a lot of clients, they can really take part of conservation in action in the making because the Sanctuary 2 is going to open up pretty soon. I mean, I think it's opened up now, and we're just waiting for the rhinos to arrive, right? So
Yeah, correct. So Sanctuary 1, we've already ticked the box. We're calling it a success. You know, Sanctuary 2, we finished last year. Sadly, we didn't get delivered last year, but we should be getting them this year. And Sanctuary 2 is 5-6 times bigger than Sanctuary 1. So another group of villages further down have said, hey, they want in on this thing. They like the idea of rhinos being in the area, attracting tourism to the area. And again, this is the theme we were talking about earlier, the power of a well-used tourism dollar, what it can do for conservation, you know, and what it can do for the future in terms of looking after Africa, Africa's wildlife and Africa's people.
yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Butch. And speaking of that, we kind of want to just end off with some of the great wildlife conservation work that Ultimate Safari is doing kind of all at the same time, right, Tad?
Yeah, and I think this just dovetails exactly with what Butch has been saying, and frankly, Matt has been saying, and Jasci has been saying, and Amit through you has been saying, and Brian through me has been saying, which is without communities and empowering and engaging communities, none of this is possible, and it's not frankly right to do it without communities. And this is an example, you know, community land, protecting wildlife, various wildlife, desert adapted wildlife in Namibia, from the Save the Rhino Trust and the communal conservancies like Camp Doris and Dooley Ridge, which we talked about before, to partnering with the Giraffe Conservation Foundation in communal conservancies as well as national parks to preserve what is considered, you know, the silent extinction. People don't know giraffes are going extinct as well. To the Desert Lion Project up in the far reaches of the northwest part of Namibia, working with Flip Stander and preserving wildlife, again, in community-owned areas and being able to encounter these incredible desert-adapted creatures. But it all is in the effort to preserve wild spaces, protect wildlife, all in partnership with communities and for the benefit of communities as well, not just for the benefit of wildlife and tourists.
Awesome.
So I think, yeah, Mark, we're going to run through impact real quick and then get to the practical takeaways.
Yeah, just in the interest of time, what I'll actually do, I will just send you guys, everyone that's attending the webinar, a packet of just some of the progress reports and impact. Because what I love about working with these guys, the Kusini partners, is that we measure our success and failures, right? And I think that's super important in conservation. And we have the numbers to back it up and to prove it. So we do have them listed here, but I'm just going to kind of quickly move forward with them, quickly just flash them on the slides. I will send this out to everybody because these are all measurable KPIs, if you want to put it that way. And we have all the numbers to show that, you know, we really do mean business when it comes to conservation.
And Mark, just to jump in, because Birgit wanted me to emphasize this, and Tyrone said the same in his presentation, but the key to all of these projects is consistent funding. And getting a one-time donation is nice, but it's really about consistency and keeping them going. And the best way to keep consistent funding is through tourism. And all of these numbers are thanks to visitors coming to visit. So everybody asks, what can I do to help save wildlife in Africa, or save wildlife in Latin America or Asia, or save the tigers? Go on a safari, go travel, go visit these places. Your presence, and all of you on this call know this, you're selling travel. I'm preaching to the choir, but that consistency of funding is thanks to your guests. So keep them coming. Otherwise, these projects can't survive.
Yeah.
No pressure.
And then just lastly, so how do we make that practical? So now that you guys know what their stories are, we have stats to back up their work. So how do we weave that in as part of the customer journey? Really, there's kind of 3 stages where we want to be mindful of, right? So talking about the lead generation stage in that marketing front, right? So unless you're a voluntourism company, you know, marketing an exclusive conservation-based itinerary might not be the most effective way to promote this type of travel, right? Because no one really wants to do 10 or 12 days of just conservation tourism. That's not what a lot of our clients want to do. But And we also want to make sure that selling conservation or sustainable travel is not pedagogical, meaning we're not trying to lecture people. You know, this should still be a positive experience. It should make you feel better as a traveler, because that's really what this is all about. This is all about enhancing that client experience. So even though our clients are aware that they want to support companies that focus on conservation and sustainable travel, this might not be the main motivation for going to those destinations, right? So instead, yeah, let's use some of these conservation stories that Butch, Jasci, Tyrone, Matt have told us, right? And use this as enhancements to your itineraries. And some of those experiences, like visiting the rhinos, you know, or going to Galapagos Magic Camp, or spending time with the team at Musikesi Conservation, you can use these as hooks in your itinerary. You don't necessarily have to build an itinerary around them, but you want to bubble them up when you're describing your travel, right? So these are really great hooks that make for great talking points when you're trying to sell your trip from a lead generation perspective. And it's always good to dedicate 1 or 2 days to do them if they just want a sample of it, kind of like a taste or an introduction to conservation. But for it to be really meaningful, and I talked to Birgit about this, spending 3 or 4 days, that's when you can really spend time on the field if that's something that they really want. And a lot of our partners here are more than capable of helping out your clients kind of fine tune what experiences they want out of it. But you do want to dedicate some time when you're marketing these itineraries. Okay, so that's from a lead generation phase. And these are kind of just sample of the hooks that you can use in your itinerary. So for instance, going on an underwater safari in the Pemba coral reef system that Matt was talking about, right? That's one of its kind, right, Matt? No one's really ever done a guided safari underwater, right?
No, that's true. It's kind of a world first.
Yeah. So that's a really great hook that you can include as part of a larger itinerary, or, you know, being part of a conservation in action that's happening right now, because we know that the rhino project that Butch is working on is an ongoing process. So for them to be part of that, that process is very meaningful, right? Or tracking endangered black rhinos on foot, that's your hook. Or in this case, in Peru, you know, trekking, going in Peru and doing a lodge to lodge trek with alpaca herders and staying at the highest community owned and run lodges in the world, right? So these are interesting hooks that we can provide for you guys, and we will send you a list of some of these interesting activities that you can do, that you can use to market your itineraries. Like, don't be afraid. Don't just keep it on your back pockets. Like, put this out front and center, because they do sell. They're not just conservation efforts. They become really good tourism products as well, right? In other ways, you know, to talk about conservation now, this moves a little bit into that consultation stage, right? So this is when we're starting to engage with our clients. Your best medium for this is really storytelling. So hopefully we've given you enough ammunition based on the stories that our Kusini partners have given you. So please use this, because this is where your passion and your experience and knowledge comes into play, right? You're not just, you know, oftentimes as someone selling travel, we're so locked in on availability, we're so locked in on logistics that we forget that we're selling vacations, right? We're selling travel. So it really needs to feel good and it needs to be meaningful. Well, you know what? Use some of these stories and weave that in your storytelling process, because oftentimes, as I said earlier, it's just an afterthought, right? We don't really think about it. We just kind of put it on the side and say, by the way, these guys are doing cool things. But you know what? Maybe let's change the narrative a little bit, right? Let's incorporate that in the selling process. And you can also definitely use it as a selling tool, you know, as if you really need to push a booking and say, hey, you want to do something cool and meaningful, do some of these activities that these guys are doing. So just from a consultation process, right? This is where some of that information can cascade down, right? When someone's saying, you know, why am I going to Bandargarh or Kana, right? So based on what we talked about today, we'll start talking about Amit and the history of his family and their time with tiger conservation. It's worth giving all that information to your clients, and therefore, you know that having that background and history with tiger conservation, already you're working with a team that's an expert in that field, right? So once you bring that in the conversation, then you can start throwing in some of those stats, the growth of the tiger population as part of this collective conservation effort. So now you've got an almost full cycle of stories, which started from why am I going to these places? Now you've got some ammunition to close in and lock in that sale, right? Similarly, in Todos Santos, something really simple as the Alianza Cerro Basura that Brian is so heavily involved in. You can use this to enhance that experience of the client and make that a feel-good travel experience, right? I love, when selling Zambia, I always love talking about, hey, why should we go to the Kafui? It's massive. It's so big, and I heard there's lots of tsetse flies, and the game viewing might not be as good. But you got to flip that around and tell Tyrone and Phil's story of how when they got there, they were on foot, they built those roads, the animals came back, then they got slapped in the face by poaching. Then they started their conservation efforts, right? Which is now part of your safari experience when you travel with them, right? And then you can talk about the quality of game experience because of that symbiotic relationship of their camp and the conservation effort. And then you show the stats, right? Like, hey, this is something that's working, it's ongoing, right? And it's still happening. So now what you've created is a really neat process that answers the question of why you should go there from a consultation process. And you got a story to back it up and proof that something that they're doing is working. And this should make your clients feel good about traveling, right? So you're not lecturing them on conservation, but you're making them feel really good about the way they travel, right? I think that's what this is all about. And then lastly, on the post-trip stage, when they come back, in most cases, these are immersive conservation experiences that surprisingly becomes the highlight of their trips. Like, you don't expect it to be the highlight, but they end up becoming one. So this often leads to repeat business. So I cannot, say enough that just a quick follow-up to emphasize the stuff that they did, and then giving them a link to, some of those donation pages or the links to those organizations that they work with usually triggers a cycle saying, oh, I want to come back and bring my friends, and I want to come back and support this cause. Or sometimes we've seen instances where clients have donated money and something was built based on that, and they want to keep coming back and showing their friends and seeing how their donations have come about, right? So it becomes a full cycle. So don't forget that on the post-trip stage of this whole cycle, you can put conservation and sustainable travel as a tool to get clients to come back. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because you're helping bring tourism dollars in to some of these conservation effort, right? So yeah, and I'll send you guys a link on some of the organizations that we talked about and where your clients can help. But I'll try to package this to everyone and make sure that you have the assets that you need when selling conservation. Cool. Any questions, guys? Sorry, we ran a little bit over time, but we tried to keep it within an hour.
We did have Amit, I think, join us at some point there. So Amit, if you want to say, if you're still there, oh, he may have left. Just kidding. Oh well. Anyway, Mark, amazing job, man. I was skeptical we get this done in less than 2 hours, and you managed to be an incredible MC to keep it moving. And thanks to Matt and to Butch and to Tyrone and to Jasci, who did have to leave, for telling your inspiring and amazing stories. You can see in the chat, if you guys haven't already, the kudos coming in from those of us who have, for those that have joined us and who know you and really appreciate all the work that you're doing on the ground. And I think I'll just add in one thing, and then we can open it up to more questions, which is, as I've said in the chat, we can't do, or our partners cannot do any of this without the support of you and your travelers. So it is because of the support that you're giving all of our partners that they are able to do any of this. So thank you, and no pressure, but we need you. So send more travelers, please, so we can continue these incredible projects and continue supporting communities and protecting wild spaces and wildlife.
Great. Yeah, I don't know if you have any questions. I think that's it, Tade.
Yeah, I think
this for everyone.
I think we'll leave it at that. But like Mark said, we'll send some follow-up materials that'll help you in your sales to support these projects and conservation travel in general. And yeah, happy selling and happy protecting wild spaces and wildlife and empowering communities. Thank you to all of you that are helping us.
Thank you guys.
Kusini, guys, if you want to stick around for a few minutes, we got good just to chat briefly if you can.